Hello and welcome back to Whitney Alex Works recap of The Bachelorette Season 19, Episode 2. Gabby and Rachel are ready to continue their journey as double bachelorettes, but there is still a struggle to continue to know the men as there are 29 of them still. Week 2 focuses on Rachel and Gabby beginning to navigate their feelings and deciding who they want to pursue. And of course, things are going to get messy. Let's dive into Episode 2. We begin the new week with Gabby and Rachel reflecting on how night one went, and they are eager to get to know more of the men, citing that they didn't get to talk to a lot of them on night one. So the question is, how can they get to know the remaining 29 men on a rare rainy day in Southern California? Meanwhile, the 29 men have moved into the mansion and it's crowded. There are not enough beds for everyone, and it's overcrowded in the kitchen in the morning as the men are making breakfast. But even though it's raining, Gabby and Rachel have a plan to get to know the men better. They walk in and announce to the men that there is going to be a pageant. They drop off red bags that contain an assortment of Speedos, where we are treated to a lot of black squares. The men have 30 minutes to prepare as they are required to show off what they got and prepare a talent part for the pageant. And of course, there is a catch. The standouts get to go to an after party with Rachel and Gabby. First up is Logan, who Rachel really likes, and Gabby kind of likes too. He shows off his talent by doing the worm and gets everyone pumped up for the situation. Gabby and Rachel say in their confessionals that they are looking for a guy that has a good attitude and that can have fun with the activity. Some standouts include Meatball, who decides to pour spaghetti sauce all over his body, Shirtless Jacob, who sits down and talks to Gabby and Rachel about debts. He is a mortgage broker, Johnny, who gives both Gabby and Rachel a kiss on the cheek, but then we are treated to Chris, a mentality coach who gets trolled by production, being called tone deaf, thinking he is a natural leader, and he decides he is a singer, but apparently he will wear the cloak of a villain. More on Chris soon. Surprisingly, only 6 men get invited to the after party. I thought more would be invited considering this is only week 2. The 6 men who stood out to Rachel and Gabby were Avon, Jason, Johnny, Colin, Brandon, and Logan. Gabby and Rachel are excited about having their first after party as the 6 lucky men get to spend some quality time with the double bachelorettes. But Rachel is in for a tough night as the men she talks to treat the conversations with surface level stuff. Brandon talking about how many states he's visited, Colin talking about his love for Harry Potter, and Jason who tells Rachel he is more interested in Gabby and picks a side. Rachel is pretty dejected. She feels off about being the Bachelorette. But then she runs into Logan and they have a nice conversation, which leads to a kiss. And Rachel's spirits are lifted again, but not so fast because Logan is also hitting it off with Gabby. They too kiss, and it's pretty awkward as Rachel eventually tells Gabby that she kissed Logan. And Gabby realizes that maybe she needs to concede Logan to Rachel, which she eventually does. And at the end of the date, Rachel decides to give her rose to Logan. And Gabby, who was having a great time with Johnny, gives it to him, sharing a kiss on the date, and they hit it off. But with Gabby giving up Logan to Rachel, will Logan give up Gabby for Rachel? That question lingers as the season is getting messy fast. With 2 roses given out so far, there is going to be 2 one-on-one dates, one for each Gabby and Rachel to choose from. Rachel decides to take Jordan V on a date, the 27-year-old drag racer from Georgia who made a connection with Rachel night 1. They head out together in a convertible where Rachel takes the wheel and drives down the highway, laughing and having a great time so far. She takes him to an airport where they are going to do a zero-gravity simulation, and Jordan V is a little nervous, but they head on in and have a great time floating around, eventually kissing as they are bouncing from wall to wall, and everything seems to be going great with them. And when they head to the night portion of the date, Rachel is dressed in sparkly red, hoping to further her connection with Jordan V, but something is about to halt their progress. And despite Jordan V and Rachel seemingly hitting it off, Rachel can't help but feel that something is off. and she doesn't feel like Jordan V could be the one for her. She steps away from Jordan V and talks to the production crew about it, and then she heads back in, telling Jordan that despite the great connection they share, she feels that something is missing and does not give the rose to Jordan V, which means she is sending him home already. 28 men remain. As Jordan V is sent home, Rachel admits she is feeling like she is failing as the lead, knowing that so far everything has been far from perfect. And we are treated to a song by Ashley Cook and Brett Young, as they were supposed to perform for Rachel and Jordan if she gave him the rose. But instead, we see a perplexed Rachel and a shocked group of men who can't believe Jordan V was sent home so early on. Meanwhile, while Rachel is having her date with Jordan V, Chris, the mentality coach from California, is talking to a group of men about fantasy suites of all things, and he pulls a Luke P. week 2, saying that if he makes it to fantasy suites and he gets the last date during that week and he figures out that one of the women slept with another man, he would leave as quickly as possible. Of course, this rubs the men the wrong way. First, by being controlling about the procedures of the show. Why are you on the show knowing the process? And why are you thinking about fantasy suites during week 2? Well, it seems Chris is self-imploding, and we will see more of his downfall later. But next up is Gabby's first one-on-one with Nate, a 33-year-old electrical engineer from Illinois. On the date card, Gabby tells Nate to bring a bathing suit, and he ends up heading to the Bachelorette mansion where he meets up with Gabby, and they see Rachel toasting to their date. And Rachel can tell that Gabby and Nate's connection is natural. And just as fast, overlooking the mountains, Nate and Gabby share a kiss. Then a helicopter comes to pick them up, and they get a bird's eye view of Southern California's coastline, seeing Malibu, Santa Monica, and even churning inland to see the Hollywood sign in downtown Los Angeles. All the while they are connecting and kissing. They eventually land near Dodgers Stadium, where production has transported a hot tub overlooking Los Angeles. This is where bring your swimsuit was important, as Gabby and Nate get in and kiss some more. During the nighttime portion of Gabby and Nate's one-on-one, Nate informs Gabby that he is a father to a 6-year-old girl, and he is grateful that he is a father as he wants to be in her life. And this makes Gabby tearful as she tells Nate that she is not close to her mother, but has a close relationship with her father, telling Nate that she hopes she could be a mother one day, but knowing that it would hurt because she would love it so much. And Gabby eventually gives the rose to Nate, securing him another week with Gabby. They then dance and kiss some more before the date is over. Gabby and Rachel are ready to give it their all in their second cocktail party, hoping to further their connections with the remaining men. But many of the men are apparently still confused as to who they truly want to pursue. And things start to get pretty weird. Mario, who got Gabby's first impression rose, decides to talk to Rachel. And it's pretty strange as it seems pretty random, but they hit it off, not without Gabby looking over and seeing them connecting. Well, Rachel, despite having a bumpy week, she hits it off with a couple of men. First is Tyler, a small business owner from New Jersey. They play amusement park basketball and end up sharing a kiss. Then she hits it off with Zach, a tech executive from California, and they too share a kiss. Meanwhile, Gabby is connecting with Eric, the man with the groomed mullet, and they are making out on a blanket. But despite the happy vibes of the evening, Quincy has a bone to pick with Chris. He decides to tell Rachel about what Chris said earlier in the week about his fantasy suites ultimatum, and Rachel is shook. She is immediately upset and heads over to talk to Gabby about it. Gabby's reaction of only ew made me laugh, and the two head over to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. They ask to talk to Chris, and Chris tries to defend himself but doesn't do a great job. And Gabby and Rachel believe it is not appropriate for Chris to be talking about fantasy suites when it's only been 4 days. So together, they decide to send Chris home, and he walks out, but then he decides to come back, only to summon the men who called him out and discuss their reasoning for telling Rachel and Gabby about what he said. But Gabby and Rachel are shocked. They send him off again, saying that he needs to respect their decision that they asked him to leave. And reluctantly, and with everyone watching, Chris finally heads out. 27 men remain. Next up is the rose ceremony. Gabby and Rachel know they have to make some big cuts this week, but they are ready, stating that getting a rose means getting a rose from both of them and continuing into next week. Logan, Johnny, and Nate are safe, and Gabby and Rachel call out the men in the following order. Gabby gives the first rose to Jason. Rachel gives her first rose to Avon. Gabby then chooses Eric. Rachel chooses Zach. Gabby chooses Jordan H. And then Rachel chooses Quincy. Gabby then hands out a rose to Michael. Rachel gives the next rose to Tino. Next, Gabby gives a rose to Jacob. Rachel then gives a rose to Tyler. Gabby gives a rose to Termaine. Rachel gives a rose to Hayden. Gabby gives a rose to Meatball. Rachel gives the next rose to Kirk. Gabby gives a rose to Spencer. Rachel gives a rose to Alec. And then Gabby's last rose goes to Ethan. And what is interesting is the Mario question. He literally just got Gabby's first impression rose, and now he is at risk of elimination. And then Rachel decides to give her last rose to Mario, securing him another week. But is he interested in Gabby anymore, or has he switched sides to Rachel? I guess we will have to wait and find out about Mario's interest. So with the rose ceremony over, 6 men are now headed home. They are Brandon, Colin, John, Justin B, Matt, and Ryan. Now only 21 men remain. Thank you for watching Whitney Alex Works recap of The Bachelorette Season 19, Episode 2, Gabby and Rachel's Week 2. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe at Whitney Alex Works for more videos in the future. See you soon for the next episode.